Hey, good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order of the City of Lathrup Village Planning Commission for Tuesday, December 17th, our last regularly scheduled meeting of the year. And we all rise and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we get started with roll call, I have one message to mention to the commission. We have received notice from Bruce Kopis that he is resigning his position on the Planning Commission. So for the City of Lathrup Village, if this would creates an opening, so we will be looking for applications for an additional member. Please contact the city clerk and she can provide you the information necessary to submit an application for that position. With that message delivered, we'll move on to roll call.
Roll call. Chair Piotrowski.
Here.
Secretary Hammond.
Here.
Board Member Hulieza.
Here.
Board Member Cantor.
Here.
Board Member Stansberry.
Here.
And Board Member Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so, next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at it? And if there are any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, it's one suggestion in the interest of using time of our applicants here who have a site plan in front of us for approval or for review. I'd like to suggest we move new business item number 7 above old business item number 6.
Okay, so we have a motion to make that adjustment. Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. So, if there are any, beyond that, any other questions or modifications to the agenda, we'll entertain
I have
a...
a question. Under new business A, the first address listed is 26710, but on our plans that we were given in the mail, it says 26700. Should those be the same?
I believe the correct address is 26710.
26710.
26780. And I think it's correct on all the rest of the plans. It's just
this first
misstated
one?
on the photo. Yeah.
Okay. So that's just an acknowledgement of that. That is correct in the agenda.
Okay.
So, we'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion's granted. We approve the agenda with the one modification as far as the order. Okay, so we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the meeting minutes for the regular meeting of November 19th, 2019. Everyone has had a chance to review the meeting minutes. If there are any questions or corrections to be presented, otherwise we'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair, there was a correction on page 3 where it indicates the tree lighting ceremony December 19th, and that should be December 17th, which is today, right?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Okay, if there are no other modifications to the meeting minutes or corrections, we'll entertain a approval of them as with that stipulation.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Hearing none. The meeting minutes are approved with that one correction. So we move on to the next item, public comments. If the public would like to make any comments regarding any items that are not on the agenda, now would be the appropriate time. Okay, hearing none, we'll close that item and move on to the next item. We'll start right off with new business, the conceptual site plan for 26710 Southfield Road, the Lathrup Shopping Plaza. So now we have received a packet along with the agenda and the minutes this week. And there's also a few packets which have been provided which show some additional views of or renderings of the site. And we've also received some information, the letter from Giffords Webster for their site plan review. That was something provided to us just this evening. So I think there's going to probably need to be a little bit of time for people to review that and get familiar with some of those items. But maybe the best way to do that is to just have our city planner lead us through that.
I can give you a quick overview of what you have in front of you, and then we can let the applicant talk about the project a little bit. So about maybe a month ago or so, I think, we met with the applicants and we talked about this project. And we shared with them that pursuant to the zoning ordinance standards for site plan review, because it's the reuse of a building and there's a potential expansion of the building and there's no existing site plan on file, that this project had to be reviewed by the Planning Commission with the submission of a full site plan. So we've been working with them over the last few weeks to get them all, to have them get us all of the information that's required by the ordinance for us to do a proper review on it. We weren't able to get all their material in time to get you a letter. But in talking with the applicant last week, they felt that they would like to stay on the agenda. Normally, we wouldn't have this before you until it was all complete, just to save everybody time. But they were interested in hearing your comments and your feedback, so we said we would do what we could in terms of review, a short, quick review, to let them know what else is missing, and then let them hear from you in terms of some of your questions or comments that you have, things that you might like to see before they submit again for our January meeting. So just quickly going over the review, this is an existing building. It is on the east side of Southfield Road, just south of 696. And they are planning a facade improvement to this building, as well as a small addition of an outdoor patio on the north side of the building. And you may see that on one of those drawings. That is a covered seating area, and they're proposing to enclose it with a vinyl canopy. And that's about a little over 300 square feet of space and about 12 people that can be accommodated there, I think, or 24, sorry. We did note that in the ordinance that building materials are required to be brick, natural stone, masonry materials other than brick or a combination thereof, and then some standards that go along with that. So we're not completely clear if this is going to be something that's going to be up year-round in terms of the vinyl canopy, if it comes down at all, and that's something that we thought that you might want to discuss with them to determine whether that standard is met of the ordinance. And then in terms of parking, because of the expansion on the north side for this additional seating area, we will count that as part of the usable floor area in terms of making our parking calculation. I mean, we're not able to determine from the materials that they submitted in terms of the interior square footage and floor area. Based on the existing size of the building from a gross size, we determined 48 spaces are needed. They have 61 on the site, so they may be okay, but we're just not sure because restaurants do require more parking. We want to make sure that they have a sufficient amount to accommodate that on site. They also have 3 spaces down at the end that are vacant. We wouldn't want to approve something that has a higher parking standard and then leave those spaces that may be difficult because they may have a hard time parking there. So that's just more information that we need. In addition, the setbacks and the property dimensions, and just really to confirm whether there's any outdoor lighting that's being proposed as part of this. So those were just our brief comments. Other than that, we think that the facade improvements look really nice, and we think that'll be a great improvement for that part of Southfield Road. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have or let the applicant go and give their.
I just have a quick question before we get to the applicant. So because there's information still missing, we won't be able to vote on a recommendation for approval tonight, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we would look at this as more of a preliminary review, maybe with a little bit more information than we sometimes get, but still not all the
Right.
information we would need for a,
Right.
for a site plan review.
Right, and we let them know that last week, so they are here
Okay.
just to answer questions and get your feedback.
Okay. So, if, are there any questions that members on the commission have for the applicant, or would we prefer to have them just lead us through? Okay. So you have the floor. If you'd like to just present to us your package and what you've
Okay. very good.
designed intent.
So what we've done here, and I guess some of the information that we were preliminary told was that we were going to get approval for the canopy.
Oh, could
I'm
you
sorry.
get the
Oh, you can do
microphone?
it.
Yeah.
I could stand right here if that's easier.
Yeah. Just give us
So,
your name and.
oh,
yeah, and-
Brian Boltheis, NCS team, representing Sam Cernow for this project.
Okay.
What we were tasked to do was to improve the facade of the building and try to create a more updated look. And in doing that, there was a tenant at the end of the building that's currently a pizza place that was looking to have some kind of a covered canopy. So we came to them to say, can we provide this all year round vinyl canopy in a steel structure? Some of the concerns we had were, do we have to provide fire suppression? Do we have to provide heating? And I think a lot of it was, no, we don't, but obviously in the wintertime, you're gonna need some kind of space heaters to keep people comfortable if they're gonna use it in the wintertime. So that was the main reason to have the meeting, to see if the site is existing. We're not really changing any of the dynamic of anything other than, can we add this 12 by 24 canopy? The canopy material is fire resistant. I gave you a spec on, it's basically industrial strength canopy that can be done out in the wintertime. So in doing so, we thought that maybe the approval could be, we understand what you want to do. Is this something we need to do the whole site plan approval, or is this something administratively can be done? It was told, no, we need to go ahead and do the whole process, since we're doing the whole canopy, or the whole facade.
The whole facade.
So the site plan that we had, and I guess I was not aware, I don't know if Sam was, we didn't really know that we didn't have a site plan on file. We had limited information which we presented, and it seemed like it was okay at the time, so we just added what we thought was appropriate to keep the process moving forward. It turns out that's not the case. So we're fine with that. We will provide the information you need for that. The facade itself is just going straight up from where it is now. It's currently a gable roof. We're going to take the front side and move it up, so everything will slope to the back. All the drainage will be taken care of in the back, and then that's what gives you this nice facade. We're using newer materials like Nichiha. It's a cement-based board, so it's solid.
I think it's
no
gonna-
maintenance. It's you've seen them all in the buildings now.
Yeah, I
Everybody's
think it's
using
going to
these.
be important to get a sample or an example in front of.
Sam's brought samples of that, the different colors and materials. Some are wood-looking, some look like concrete. So it's really quite decorative. The and where the signage is going, we're going to use a corrugated metal. So we're going to paint that, powder coat it. Should last. Yeah. So that's, if you guys want it, that's kind of thickness, and it's all solid. You can't wreck it. Yeah. I think he's got more samples too. So so we're hoping that the facade is going to be somewhat approved. The canopy will be resolved as far as if we're allowed to do that or not, and any other questions you might have. Yeah, this is also the same material, but we're going to use corrugated, or he can do that material. And this is the wood look material, so you can see all the renderings. Are those three pieces? It's applied with just plywood on the brick. Oh yeah, plywood on the brick. Almost like you're hanging closet organizers as a metal frame. You just slide all the panels in. So it's really a nice product.
So while everybody's looking at the stuff, so
Okay.
you're looking to get recommendation for approval of the canvas section that you're looking to add.
And the facade, if you think it looks appropriate, what you're looking for. I mean, we meet all the height restrictions, and we're coming out maybe 4 or 5 inches from the wall and going up.
Is there a reason that you're looking to do this now before a full site plan review?
Well, when I got the letter, and we had a conversation last week, we thought the information we had would have been appropriate for what we were doing, and we could add the site plan during the building permit phase of it, which we would have all the detail at that point. If we were not recommended to do so, there was any objection to what we're doing, we would make our changes. But if you like everything and you just want further information for the permit, we can more than do that as part of the overall package. We've done that in a lot of different cases where we'll do canopies or stuff outside, and they'll say, just do that in the permit process. I understand your concept, we approve that, go ahead and finish, and you can scrutinize everything there and make sure all the details there. That's, we've done that several times that way.
Is the canopy supposed to be year-round?
Yes.
Why can't it look like the rest of the building?
That was what they had preferred.
But it looks like,
It's supposed to meant to be like an outdoor kind of
But you just
afterthought,
said-
but it's staying.
Yeah, it looks,
like
So
a
it's not meant to be permanent. Well, it is permanent, but it's not meant
so
to
it's
be.
supposed to look like a permanent tent.
Kind of, yeah. Like they do that a lot of the Caspellis or whatever. Troy, you got the building, and then they have this nice little outdoor area.
Yeah, but usually they have brick around the bottom, so it looks like it fits with the
In
rest
some
of the
cases they
building.
don't. I mean, we will landscape around it. It won't look,
But
as-
it just happens to look like you just stuck it onto the end of the building.
If Sam chooses not to do it, it's easy to take away, and we don't do it.
No, I'm saying, the outdoor part I understand.
Okay.
But why can't it look like it doesn't look like you just stuck something on the end of the building? Why can't it be designed to look like it's a part of the whole facade as opposed to something that looks like you threw it on the end of the building?
Sam would have to speak to
and I think that's a very good question, and it kind of, there's a broader issue, I think, that maybe we need to ask, and that's that what's required as far as a permanent part of the building in terms of materials, and is this, does this meet that criteria?
Right, and we do have that called out here at number, on page 2, it's number 6. It's section 5.4 called building materials. And it talks about on all permanent buildings, we're talking about the brick, the stone, and other things. There's a option or provision for architectural trim. Material may be wood, aluminum, or other material of equal strength and durability if the building walls proper are a fire-resistant material. Such trim material should not cover more than 10% of the exterior wall construction. I don't know that this necessarily falls under architectural trim as part of that, meeting that standard, but
It's more of a cladding, actually, it's an enclosure.
it is an enclosure.
It is a total enclosure, and so it's like a frame, it's more like a tent.
Right.
It's like a steel frame
Yeah,
with a
or
canopy.
I'd say a canopy, but a canopy is generally looked at as like the roof, and then it's open on the side.
You can open it in summer, so
Right.
it's got that function.
Yeah, the intent of it was to really have an outdoor space, okay, and not add another 1,000 square feet on to the building. Otherwise, we would just add more. We would just expand the footprint of the building. And I think that the reason why we wanted to have it enclosed is that in case it's wintertime and it provides for additional seating area. It's restaurants do it all the time. Social in Birmingham has it in the winter. It's really cool where you have this kind of outdoor area. It's not part of the building. It looks like a I wouldn't call it a tent, but it's got like this fire resistant material where it's enclosed, it's vinyl zip up, and you can use it all year round.
Yeah.
I think that we can do an expansion on maybe some landscaping or add some other elements that make it look like it's part of the building, per your suggestion, Commissioner Stansberry. But like ML Cafe on 15 and Lasser, they do that. They have,
I have a question.
sure.
Are we talking about Happy's Pizza?
Yes.
Happy's Pizza is not ML on 15 Mile, and it's not Social. in
Well, we're
Birmingham.
actually, sorry to correct you, we're not talking about
Okay,
Happy's Pizza.
okay, so I'm saying-
We're talking about a
Yeah, different.
potential concept
Okay.
of having.
But the
if we-
restaurant that it's going to be next to is Happy's Pizza,
Right now.
right now.
We don't know.
But you don't know who's going to end up being in there.
I don't know who's gonna be in
So
there.
the existing space where that existing restaurant is, does it have seating in it today?
Yes.
So that means we're gonna put a hole in the wall so you can go to the tent too, to the outdoor,
Yes,
excuse me, not tent.
the outdoor area, yeah, the outdoor patio.
But it is designed to be permanent and year-round.
Yes.
Anita's Kitchen also in Ferndale has a very large expansion of it's like a black canvas thing.
I've seen them.
Oh,
I've seen
yeah,
all the
no,
ones
it
he's
doesn't look
mentioned. I've
terrible.
been
I
in
know
them. But they don't look like you stuck them onto the building like that. That's all.
Right.
That just happens to look like somebody had a building and they drew it right on the side of it. It just doesn't look like.
Well,
it fits.
it's a rendering. So we didn't go ahead and use the amount of detail for a site plan. I don't know how detailed we need to be to get a site plan approval. So that's something that we can, I mean, even like these renderings that we've done are pretty high res and pretty detailed. I don't know if that's a requirement that we had to do. We just wanted to kind of go, above and beyond, but we didn't incorporate that same level into the end. So that's probably why it looks like it was kind of more 2D instead of 3D. So it really just depends on what's required. And I think the other important thing to know is that there is just as much of a chance that it's not going to go there as there is a chance that it will go there. And so what we're really trying to do is, I think that having an outdoor space where people can use it in the summer and kind of have additional seating area and have a cool, exposed aggregate floor would be a great amenity for any restaurant that's there. We don't know whether it's going to be Happy's or whether it's going to be something else. But at the same time, we also don't know if it depends on who the user is. So if we ended up, having a new tenant there and a hair salon wanted to go in there, then we probably wouldn't do the patio at all. So I think what our goal is to try and see if we can at least get site plan approval for it. And then if we decide not to do it, just get administrative approval. So that's kind of where we were going. And I guess, from our end, we need to research how much detail we should, add on these things, because again, it's just a site plan. It's not like a full-blown marketing, but I agree.
Right.
I mean, if we were to market this to a potential tenant, they would probably say, yeah, it looks like, you guys kind of did a 2D version here instead of like compared to the rest. And it's much different, but, it was more of just for site plan conceptual, so.
That makes sense.
Well, I think to me, the idea, the concept of having outdoor seating for like a restaurant is a desirable thing. I think making it look integrated, giving it some more maybe design integrity than something that looks temporary, that may or may not hold up well or may or may not weather well, and to provide a desirable appearance that's going to be attractive to the level of an outdoor patio seating area that I think the community would like to see. I don't know if that captures other feelings of other people on the commission, but that's my look at it.
Yeah, I think, and from my perspective, any recommendation for approval that we might send up to the council would probably include some kind of language around those lines, anticipating that, or recommending approval based on the look of the temporary area, looking integrated with the rest of the building. And there was all these examples we were just talking about, ML Cafe, Anita's Kitchen, there are Crispelli's, right? They all have those touches to them. Similar coloring, right? It actually looks like even though the walls can roll up, that it's a part of the existing structure. And this doesn't, which understandably why, because it's a conceptual, just an idea. So we understand why it is this way, but that's where my thoughts are, is that if we were to send this up with a recommendation for approval to City Council, that it would expect
Yeah, we look
that.
at it as it's an image that's saying this is the shape, the square footage.
Yep.
We can improve on the aesthetic. If you're okay with that, we will work on that part better, if that's an
But,
improvement.
and Sam, I mean, your point is not, it's well taken that this may not even happen, right? If you end up doing the improvements to the exterior of the existing building, and then you have a tenant that really doesn't need, you know, that extra exterior temporary space, then you may not even build it at all. So, you know, that's not lost on us either.
Yeah, I just think we, and this may just be more of us behind the scenes understanding what it is that's required to actually come out and present is what's the level of detail, because our original plan, if you remember on the poster board that I think we gave a couple weeks ago, the whole thing was 2D, and I was like, you know what, I think that might be hard for people to really visualize what it's going to look like, and so in bringing the materials, and then you know, NCS spent a lot of time making, you know, even the sky and the trees and the lawn and the parking lot, and really trying to get that to look a little bit better. We just didn't really focus on the, you know, outdoor seating area, and so it's just, I think that the point that you're making is very well taken. I just have to figure out a way to present it so that people can understand that that's what we're trying
Yeah, I
to do.
mean, from a feedback perspective, I would say like, the rest of what's presented for the existing building looks great. I
Yeah.
have no issues with that at all, and you obviously put a lot of time and energy into making that look really nice, and then we're just, this part at the end is just
Right.
unclear, and,
Yeah.
and I understand why.
Yeah, we felt like you would approve that for sure, because we did spend a lot of time. We just didn't know if you were gonna approve the outdoor before we spent a whole lot of time on it.
Sure.
But in conceptual, this is the concept, but we can make it look really cool if you
When I
want.
say, Jill?
I guess I would have a suggestion that maybe you did a nice job of bringing in the samples for the rest of the building, but a sample for the vinyl would be really helpful. In addition to that,
Definitely.
the specs that would talk about
Okay.
how long is the color good for, like, I think your concerns are, we don't want to see this fading in a year or two.
Right.
We don't want to see it ripping. If it does, you know, we don't want the vinyl, if the windows are going to, you know, tear, get fogged, we don't want it to look like that. So I think the specs on that, like how long is stuff warranted and guaranteed for? I think you might want to consider, just based on what I'm hearing, is there a way that you could make the roof more permanent?
Make
Either
the
like
roof look
pergola
part of the building,
style?
Then we can drop this canopy up and down.
Yeah,
and
and maybe
see
then
it.
the vinyl could just be around the windows. That could be more in line with the
Yeah.
ordinance in terms of it being.
Or even as a decorative patio, and if it's intended to be left open to the air, something that's more decoratively enclosed than just a vinyl wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I would reference the restaurant across the street, where it's not occupied right now, but it has a
Yeah,
nice
yeah.
wall that would accept landscaping up to it, and also maybe decorative lighting and something like that. I know that might
Mm-hmm.
be a level beyond where, you know, this initial question is going for, you know, what would we accept? But I think we'd certainly be more interested in seeing something that looks more permanent, and that is more integrated with the building, and not a tent or just a large canvas shelter tacked onto
Yeah.
the side.
And then I think in terms of what you submit next time, these are beautiful. You did a really nice job with the illustrations. And just look again, as I sent you the requirements from the ordinance on what's required for site plan review, and that's what we need to see on the site plan, or the
The
things
site
that
plan,
are,
right.
that comprise the site
That
plan.
was our
So,
own misunderstanding of
yeah.
the detail there. Now, if the roof is more permanent, are we gonna be enforced with like sprinkler systems and other things that might cause this to be a non-starter?
That kind of gets beyond planning and.
Right, that's a building department.
And to us,
Okay,
and gets into the building, and there are questions related to, that.
right, it's a small area.
How do we
though.
interpret
It
this?
is,
Is
it's
it,
only 12 by
is it
24,
an
it's like 300
addition?
square
Is it a patio with a cover? What does the zoning stipulate is
Okay.
allowed for this? Because we don't want to set a precedent that goes in the wrong direction, or that opens us up to something that we don't want. And then beyond that, it's getting into the material issues. The materials that you've cited are more traditional materials, and this is kind of moving into now the facade updates. The newer materials, a lot of outdoor cement materials. I happen to work for a division of an architectural company that scrutinizes these materials, and so I personally have questions about integrity, durability, and you might as well, as far as how long are these
course.
expected to last, and are they going to hold up, and some other items as well. So the systems and how they're attached, I think, are, once again, the city will want to look at the technical details of how they propose making their attachments. The initial sections, to me, they're attaching to the brick. The brick is a veneer, it's not a structural material that's designed to take additional loads, so there's questions related to the facade and how it's resolved as well. That said, I tend to agree that improvements to the facade are desirable. I just think that the materiality and the details need to be, I guess, better understood, and just as from a facility owner, you want to know what you're putting on the building and how long it's going to last.
Right.
So,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Jill some questions. Is there precedence in, I know there are in other cities, but, you know, if it's all year, I mean, it's permanent. So what is the level of permanency? Is it permanent forever? Or if we give them, if the city gives them an approval, is that approved forever? Or I mean, it just seems to me that something like this is intended to serve as a temporary structure, and yet they are seeking a permanent arrangement, which is viewed, in my mind, I mean, it's intriguing to me, but there's just something that I don't understand about that, the concept.
Look at the definition of temporary structure, use, or building. In the zoning ordinance, it means a use or building permitted by the city to exist during periods of construction of the main building or use, or for special events. So it's special, it's something that's not intended to be year-round, and so if that's your question, I think if it's not temporary, then it would be permanent.
right, and to me, I guess the question of if something is temporary, then there's a more lax understanding of what those materials might be.
Right.
As opposed to something that's permanent, and what the expectation of what a permanent material that's acceptable within the zoning for this location,
I guess
and its application of how it's being used.
what precedence, and I pose this to the commission, is what precedence does this is presented? I mean, is this something that would be then adopted elsewhere? Or is this, I mean, how customary is this with other cities?
The temporary structure for the outdoor dining, I think it depends on the community and their ordinances. You've got specific building material standards that are pretty stringent, without a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to waiver from it other than the architectural trim component of it. And I'm not sure that this necessarily fits that. You may find that it does, that if it's no more than 10% of the exterior wall construction, but I'm not sure it follows that.
But then we have the vehicle, the planned unit development that we could
Right,
potentially use as a mechanism to come
Right.
to an agreement about how to.
Yeah, and I don't know that this project would rise to that level of review. I think it's part of maybe something that you want to consider in terms of a broader expansion of what is permitted in the ordinance in terms of different kinds of materials,
Right.
which certainly you could say, 20% of the building may be comprised of something other than these brick materials, and it doesn't necessarily need it to be architectural trim. It could be any part of the building could be constructed that way.
And Jill, I think it would be helpful to have, I guess, could some research be done on the part of
Sure.
Giffords Webster for what other communities are, how do they address accepting an item like this?
And
So
it may
that-
also be something that fits specifically in with their outdoor dining standards. So it's not any kind of building addition of a certain size. Could be vinyl. It
Right.
could be very much tied to, for outdoor dining purposes, whether it's seasonal or whether it's year-round with heated
Well,
elements.
we might name 3 other restaurants in
Yeah.
Ferndale, Royal Oak, and Bloomfield Hills that have this type of structure.
Right.
So those would be-
Rochester Hills has it also.
Well, Rochester Hills
I actually
has
think I may have worked for the city of Birmingham when we did
Birmingham probably.
when we
has-
made the
It's a
amendment
fun
to
feature
allow
that
it.
people are doing now. Maybe it doesn't seem to fit right now, but that's what everybody seems to be doing. And if we do it right and make it look cool, I don't want to make it look
Right,
like you
well,
said.
and I think,
Yeah.
I think the opportunity to go more closely look at that, I remember the canvas, or I remember the
Yeah,
vinyl.
You might be thinking of these tents you go on campsites and you drop a tent
Well,
down. This is a lot nicer than that. It's gonna look
I
with
understand
lights in the
thickness, head
inside,
weight,
yeah.
and material-wise, but I'm also thinking of things that look more permanent and whether whether these structures are used in combination with something that's more permanent in terms of a patio, and that doesn't necessarily rely on the walls
Right.
and the
Right.
enclosure
Takes away from-
of the same material or of the same necessarily aesthetic.
And maybe to keep your project rolling, you can submit the requirements for the site plan
Okay.
for the January meeting with,
Okay.
maybe without the outdoor dining component for now, and let the.
I think that's a good idea.
Planning commission act on that, and we can move, and then if we're gonna tweak this, you still don't have anybody for that space yet.
That's right.
So we can work on it, and then maybe we can all come back in a month or two later beyond
That's,
that.
sounds like a sensible approach, and that way they can proceed with their
The
facade
big
plan,
project,
which,
yeah, let this be a
Yeah.
caveat. We were almost trying to wrap it in as if you're good, but we'll fix it later, but then,
well,
but we can
Yeah.
wait.
we
don't have a great-
understand
it's harder to do
the
it
necessity
that way.
at times for leverage,
That's fine.
and
Yeah, I think,
for you.
sorry.
Yes, it seems to me that it's, that if you were to attract, tenants there, that if you had this, it gives you the flexibility. But in the meantime, perhaps facade renovation you can just proceed with that as
Okay.
we gather more information on this one. But we appreciate the fact that you're doing that, so thank you.
Well, the facade is going to happen regardless. That building has been unimproved, I think, since 1978. So
Well, and I see the intent, you can,
It's time.
you can raise the front of the building. It gives you a more prominent signage, which is certainly a sales point for tenants. And it refreshes certainly it refreshes the facade, the appearance of the building, and that's something that we're all, I think, in support of.
You just have to have the parking lot that dips in front of the restaurant. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes, that big hole,
Yeah.
that big dip.
yeah, we're probably going to have to do. I don't want to, overpromise and underdeliver. But that parking lot needs work.
Yeah.
So I think we just want to get our ducks in a row so that when, come January, we have enough to put in front of you to actually get a site plan approval for the facade and get going with the element of, the materials and making, the durability and structurally and
all the details.
right.
The reason I raise the materiality question is, like, we look at a lot of products that are they're quasi-concrete with fiber reinforcing. I mean, there's wood in them, and those materials over time can absorb water through edges, if there's cut edges and whatnot, and then they can start to break down. And the similar thing, the facade is the material in the system as they're proposed hang on the building, are supported off of the existing structure of the wall, which is not, it's not to be unexpected. But how it's done and whether the system addresses certain things. Getting into detail here, and I'm getting beyond my planning commissioner hat and into architecture, but the trim and how the system works can speak to some longevity, and I'm a little concerned with, there's an aluminum transition trim at the base, and I've just gotten, within a few weeks of looking at facilities where aluminum trims at the base are totally corroded out from salt. And so that's a building owner issue. That's not a planning, but what does our city look like? What do our buildings look like, and are they going to be maintained and be able to be maintained in a good fashion for the longer term versus a shorter term?
Yeah.
So
I think we're aligned. I mean,
Yeah.
the last thing we would want to do is, use materials and, invest the resources and the time, putting something together that won't last or that erodes quickly or becomes an eyesore. It becomes an expense and won't attract any new tenants, and then it also makes us look bad, to the city. So I don't think that we would use materials,
No,
but I think that it just serves as a, hey, we're going to double check that, and we're going to take a really good look at it just to make sure that, we're comfortable.
Right, we'll provide you with like the longevity, it says like a 20-year warranty on a lot of the products. I mean, it's meant, they're using it in all the buildings now. This is meant to be a cosmetic fix for a lot of these buildings.
Right.
Very durable, it's not the standard block and brick kind of construction. This gives you a lot of variety of color and option and it's, it's basically plywood, the track and the stuff going up. So
I
it's a
understand.
very easy way to convert buildings,
Right.
not destroy the whole and demo the whole thing, and you're just refacing it.
Right, and I
Almost like
understand.
putting aluminum siding over, bad stuff, but it's better than aluminum siding.
In the commercial and in the retail, in this sort of a setting,
Yep.
facades need to be flexible, and I think actually in general, in architecture, construction is going that way, where there's more, you put a skin on and you've got, what's behind it is the integrity and keeping the water and the air and everything else out, and the rest is the skin and the facade, which gives you the appearance.
Yep.
It's, when we integrate these newer systems into older buildings, what's the right way to do it to make it as durable as the construction that was there?
Right.
So that's the part I want to make sure, I'm just suggesting,
I
as a
mean,
building owner,
right.
you'd want to consider.
Right. I mean, working with the construction firms, with the architect, with any structural engineers, I mean, that's, as a building owner, that's who I rely on to make sure that not only are the materials right, but it's actually constructed and that we're able to use, parts of the existing building to, make sure that it's got the integrity that it needs to last in the long run. So I just think that this is a really good, opportunity for us to just make sure we cross our Ts and dot our Is and get the rest of the information that we need in front of you
Okay.
to start the facade. But it's well noted.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to
Are
open
there any
supply
other
a new
questions?
site
Any-
plan on the city.
Anyone on the commission have, I'm just trying
I
to
mean,
think if there were any issues.
one final statement I would say is that, from what I'm hearing from my conversations with other residents in the city, want more places like this, what you're describing, that have opportunity to have really nice dining services that, can provide a unique experience. And this sounds like the idea of it is in the right direction. So it's really just what the chairman said, making sure that it's going to be done the right way, and it serves all of
Absolutely.
our interests to do that.
Yeah,
I would concur with the niceness. When I looked at one of these images here, and sometimes images can paint a nice picture, and then the reality's a little different. Lots of green space next to this.
Yeah, it's,
It's further set back off of Southfield Road in its position a bit than I think the properties on this side of the expressway are. And so maybe there's an opportunity to make that a nice outdoor space.
very good.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's
With that, we'll move on to the old business, which is the comprehensive plan discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Oh.
so we still have 3 other bullets under new
Oh,
business.
sorry. I'll go through and cover those. I was thinking of this all together. Regular planning commission meeting updates, meeting dates.
That is
We have
in
the
your
pack-
packets.
Yes.
There's only one holiday, which is St. Patty's Day. So, otherwise, well, it's a holiday for some people. I don't know.
So I personally went through the dates, so we're talking here about the planning commission
Correct.
recommended dates.
Yep.
I definitely can't make the January 21st or February 18th dates, personally. Doesn't mean we shouldn't approve those. I just will not be in the country on those dates.
Thank you for the way advance notice. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's going to be true. I mean, our schedules, things will pop up and may interfere individually, and we just need to keep Susie, keep myself, keep Yvette informed so that if we have any issues with reaching a quorum, that we would know so in advance.
Always.
And,
appreciate
or
it.
try to schedule around if we have to in that situation.
Right.
So, I mean, one of these dates is my birthday, but I'll just say that.
We should definitely have
One
a
of the dates
commission
is
meeting
my
that night.
Definitely. Maybe even cupcakes or something.
But I personally don't have any issues right at this point regarding the dates. So
You will need to adopt these dates, though, I believe.
we do need to officially. So we have a motion to approve the dates for our regularly scheduled meetings for 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Let the record show that the dates are approved for our regularly scheduled meetings for 2020. So, then we'll move on to the Joint City Council Planning Commission DDA meeting date proposals here.
Thank you for humoring me, by the way, with all the doodle requests over the course of the last couple of weeks. So these were proposed to you back in our joint meeting in October. Really the one date that was kind of iffy for everyone was really trying to figure out what January date was. So January 13th came up as the one that the majority of individuals who responded could attend. So this is where we're at. These are the 5th Mondays. So trying to avoid
Fifth
all of the
Mondays?
conflicts.
5th Mondays?
The 5th Monday.
Fifth Monday.
The 5th Monday.
Except for the 13th.
Except for the
I'm sorry, I
13th.
had that.
Is this for the commission to approve?
Yes.
Is this the approving body?
So we have a motion to approve these dates?
They don't need to. Oh,
To
so
accept?
What?
I guess, never mind, I stand corrected.
Never mind.
Never mind, I stand corrected. We don't
It's
need
just information for us, and then we can just say.
Just as what we did last night with council, there's a general consensus that these dates still work for this body, then we'll keep that schedule. But
Okay.
it's not a
I don't
regular
think so.
standing meeting that needs to be approved.
Okay.
That's good.
See, we're
I
not
think
so
we've decided we have a consensus on that.
Yeah, yep.
Very good. So, then there's the 2019 annual report.
You want me to do that one?
I'll let you do it.
All right. So you have at your seats the annual report of the Planning Commission. It starts with just an introduction that outlines that the Michigan Planning Enabling Act does require this. We haven't done it, I don't think, in the last 2 years necessarily.
I don't remember it being done.
We did do one for you a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But we're doing it again now. So there's just an explanation of your board composition. I think it's fine to leave it as it is, the Planning Commission roster. And a little bit about staff. We included your department activities, so we have development reviews. There were 6 development applications. That included 2 Zoning Board of Appeals applications. The 4 that you will remember were all on Southfield Road, the gas station down on the south end, the reoccupancy right at 11 Mile and Southfield Road, the Jagged Fork Restaurant, and this current project that we have tonight. We added on to the list. 2 of those were special land use reviews. So you'll remember also that you approved the site plans, but the special land uses were approved then by council. And that was the gas station and the Jagged Fork for their serving of alcohol. 2 of those were also those special land uses required public hearings. We had 2 public hearings for those. And in addition, we worked on the plan unit development and the drive-through standards. Amendments to the zoning ordinance. Those were, I think we started in April talking about that. We went through a rapid fire process to amend the zoning ordinance to accommodate those uses. With the public hearing that was required, and those were amendments were adopted in June of this year. Other highlights, you and council and the DDA had 2 joint meetings this year. And we continue to work with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation to ensure the city retains its redevelopment ready certification status. I believe you had 11 meetings this year, which is a lot, and good job for everybody doing that. That's tough. Not every community can manage to swing 11 of the 12 months for planning commission. I think only 2 zoning board of appeals meetings. That's all I could.
Sounds about
That's
right.
all we had in our files, and then 2 joint meetings.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm running through the numbers in my head, and I'm thinking there were probably a couple of regularly scheduled meetings which were not held, but then there were some additional meetings that made up the difference there.
I think that's why.
Yeah.
And then in looking ahead, we are going to be continuing to work on the comprehensive plan and some zoning amendments that will likely come out of that. And it looks like we may have something that we're going to consider earlier rather than later in terms of building materials. But that's really the summary of your year's
Okay.
activities.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think you take action on this in terms of accepting it, I believe.
Yes,
We
and
do.
And then
accept it and then
forwarding
it
it
to
to
council.
council, right? Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to accept the 2019 Planning Commission Annual Report and forward it to council.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. That passes as well. So, I want to cover my agenda. And we'll move on to old business, comprehensive plan discussion.
Ask Susie if she wants it. I'll just move it. Could you just put it on over? Thank you. All right, sorry, I was a little distracted there. Are you on to the comprehensive plan?
Yes, on to the comprehensive plan.
All right, so last month we started talking about the goals and objectives that are in the 2015 master plan, and we wanted some confirmation that the direction contained in those goals and objectives was still valid. And after some discussion, it was suggested that really we should understand what has been accomplished to date, and then we can continue to have those conversations about whether the goals and objectives are still accurate. So in the handout, in the table handout, which is this one here, you'll see, and those of you who were here 5 years ago might recognize that format. It is the same document, except for the addition of the completed column and the hurdles column, which we just added to kind of as more of like notes, if you will, for those different items. The goals are listed in green, and then the objectives follow, and then the actions, strategies that are associated with those things are included. We identified the lead bodies, so that body that might be in charge of really implementing or taking action on an item, recognizing that there are always supporting bodies, whether it's staff or if it's council providing direction, that it's good to include that as well. I noticed as we were going through that there were some things that were action items that were associated with objectives that hadn't been included previously, so I added those, and those appear in gray. So I think we can go through them in any way that you want. If you want to go goal by goal, I think largely, in summary, that I would suggest that the city has done quite a few things to implement the master plan since 2015. As many things as it's been able to do within the context of having a lot of change of staff and limited resources with which to take care of some of these other things, and compounded by, I think, the big project, Southfield Road, being largely out of the city's hands. So I think those are some of the hindering factors, but I think even with that there's been some good progress made on the items that are included in here. But we can talk about what that looks like and what that means going forward.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions about these, if we want to go one by one.
What I was going to do is suggest that we kind of step through the goals, and then if we need to step into some of the detail that's behind the goals for any sort of discussion, or for maybe I would say a yay or a nay. I don't know if the intent was for us to work through and totally answer all the questions for these goals this evening, or if this is part of an effort that will extend over our next meeting tonight.
I think that you can ask the questions that you have about these goals, and I think you can say, generally we think this makes sense, but here's what we want to know going forward. So as we think about Some of the other analysis that we're going to do is we think about the public input that we're going to continue to have. We'll have the public open house. Are there questions that we want to ask the community that would help us clarify what we mean here, or if there's any refinements that are needed? And I think that's something that we can continue to move on. But I think having the general course set at this point is helpful in telling us how to do the remaining items that are included in the planning process.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, so I was doing a bit of bean counting. Can I share that with the commissioners?
Sure.
So if I count all of the actions here, and there are actions under objectives, but some of the objectives count themselves as action. So if I count, there's about 43. I don't know if you want to do that. But not counting the ongoing things that are indicated ongoing or in progress. Of the 43, I count that 12 of them have indeed been completed of this. And so that's a little bit more than a quarter, so that's 28%. Yay, good. And I think that pretty much most of those, or if not all of them, were completed by staff, which is the lead body. Okay, and so then I started to look, well, in terms of accountability, how many of these actions where the City Planning Commission serves as the lead, and I counted 5 of them. So that's about 12% where we are serving as the lead. And that's 12%, and I see that 1 is in progress, 2 is ongoing, and 2 are outside the beyond our control, which is we got the resources to do that, or we are still waiting on the County Road Commission. So that's just, I wanted to know, and that's what I meant by where are we in terms of progress. Perhaps if I were more liberal in counting progress, perhaps if we added the ongoing, or if one really wanted to see those where we are making some progress, then perhaps it's maybe closer to a third. So I don't know what people think about that. Is that good? Is that sufficient?
And I don't know that I can answer that question completely without knowing what, totally on item by item basis, what's in our control, and what do we need to direct to get something into our control, if there is a way to direct something into our control.
And I don't recall from a few years ago if any of these were weighted, in other words, in terms of importance. I simply gave you the number without weighting any of them, which are most important or whatever. But it seems to me that the area where the goal 3 is one where there are a lot of completed tasks, 7 of the 8, and completed by staff as the lead body.
So goal 3, just for folks who are going to be watching this online, is about support economic vitality throughout the city. An improved local economy benefits the community through job creation, improved property values, and the provision of needed goods and services for city residents. So based on this scorecard, the number of completed action items underneath that specific goal, we're doing pretty well.
And I think the second, perhaps, in terms of percentage, is goal 1. You want to read that one?
Sure. Goal 1, create a village center. Redevelop properties in the historic center of the city, transforming this area from suburban strip-style development into a mixed-use, multiple-story, walkable downtown for the city. Provide opportunities for residential housing, retail, restaurants, office, and entertainment uses. Ensure this area reflects the character of the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay, and there are 7 action goals under that, and 2 were completed and 2 are in progress. So that's going well as well. I think the next one is, in terms of percentage, is goal 4, where one of the 7 goals or actions were achieved.
So goal 4 is improve connectivity in the city, promote the independence and health of all city residents by improving transportation options within the city. Unite all quadrants of the city by improving vehicular and non-motorized transportation access. Note, the goals of the 2011 Complete Streets Plan have been incorporated into the following objectives. Additional strategies from that plan will be incorporated into the action strategies chapter that follows.
Okay. And participating in SMART, that was achieved, and the rest of the action goals are ongoing, so that's in good shape as well. I think the next one then is goal 2, which, and it looks like we've achieved 2 of the 13 action items, and there are several that are ongoing. Do you want to read that one?
Yeah, goal 2 is improve the appearance of commercial areas outside the village center. Encourage the improvement of buildings, streetscape, and signage along Southfield and 12-mile roads. Improved curb appeal will improve the city's image and attract new business and residents. And let me just say, we just had a conversation about doing just exactly that with the proposal that was in front of us for
Right.
the site plan review.
Okay. And the last 2 goals, goal 5 and goal 6, we have not yet completed any of those tasks, but there are indications that some are at least are underway or ongoing.
So goal 5 is support placemaking efforts embodied in goals, objectives, and action strategies for the Village Center and Southfield Road corridor. Identify and pursue other opportunities to create a sense of place in the city of Lathrup Village, building upon the city's identity as a diverse, caring, and welcoming community that has events and activities for all ages. And goal 6 is preserve and protect the quality and character of residential neighborhoods while offering a variety of housing options. Encourage preservation and maintenance of existing homes and neighborhoods that contribute to the charm and identity of the city. Ensure that new housing is compatible with existing residential neighborhoods. Yeah, so these 2 areas are, not much work has been done on them quite yet, or there's work going, but it's kind of, we need status updates, we need some additional information on what types of work is being done on some of these action items.
Well,
So I would say that the ones where most of the action items were achieved is goal 3 on the economic vitality, and it is one where the staff, city staff, is taking the lead, and that makes sense in terms of focus and sustainability. They're here in the office, so they're going to pay attention to those things that they need to accomplish. So what does it say then about the other action items that might be relegated to other bodies? And so perhaps it then begins to identify for us opportunities for improvement.
well, and I also think that some of the items, although there are, I mean, I think it's arguable when you go back to the city center and that there's a lot of items that are checked off the list, that there's also not a lot visible in terms of that, in terms of the perception of what's been accomplished. So, and I would, I guess, go out there and say that that would probably be, well, where is our downtown? How, you know, how are we making progress on that? And I would expect that that would be, you know, where's the, you know, what can we do better since we're not seeing that yet? And are there things that we need to do better, or that we need to address in terms of realities of things that aren't in our control, or if maybe they are, there's the possibility of getting them in our control, but that might mean somehow to raise funds, to acquire properties, to change our outlook on the zoning, and to make, create the circumstances to make it more attractive for a developer to see beyond just what we have now and just what we see now in terms of what this place is. So, And I think there's some hard realities that'll be associated with that, and I think that there's additional things to explore along those lines. If, in terms of looking at prioritizing, there's checking off the list, and then there's the, what do we see and what does the community expect? Or, and, what are we hoping to attain for our community? If we want to go through and like set those priorities, I think that might be the next step.
Well, if I could, I would suggest that's really the last step. That's after we're finished with the whole planning process. Because
Okay.
some of these strategies we may refine a little bit. Some of the actions, if we've completed them, we may take them out. Or we might write them in a way that implies that, or that conveys that these are going to be updates that are going to have to continue on an ongoing basis. And there may be new things that we need to add to really clarify what we're asking for. And then once we've got the plan adopted, then the next step would be to go through those and do the prioritization and assign tasks. And where you find that there are resources needed to achieve a certain action strategy or objective, then that's the Planning Commission to ask council to provide those resources, or to encourage council to take action on certain things. I think that's going to be a big part of the implementation of the plan. That's why we do this every 5 years, so that we can dust it off, which we didn't have to dust it off. We've been kind of working on it, I think that with Goal 3, the economic vitality portion, I think the large encouragement there to get those things accomplished are many of those objectives and action strategies are in line with the MEDC Redevelopment Ready Communities Program.
So
and so
there's a-
by doing that, that's been in the incentive to get those things done. And now we're to the point where we're going to start updating those again because, it's time to be updated and be recertified. So I think having that support from the MEDC has been really useful to the city
Right,
in that.
and there's been really a formula to follow.
Right.
I mean, a set of instructions, essentially, for achieving those goals.
Right, and in 2015, when we prepared these, we did include some of those because we knew that that was part of what the city was interested in pursuing. So those were included intentionally to help implement both that and the master plan, to bring those together.
Okay.
It seems to me that at least at this point, so that we know where we came from, that I wouldn't want to remove these action items even if we completed them, so we understand. We can certainly indicate that, gray them out and say, completed, in 2019, so that we're not at the risk of reinventing the wheel in the future. So
I agree.
So that it's also, it documents the process. The other that I would have us think about is perhaps some of these objectives need to be operationalized. You can see that there's several of them that are not, do not have action items. Maybe if they did have action items, we can sort of, work with those. It's possible that we didn't work on them because they weren't operationalized. So if we can sort of do a bit of chunking, then we could achieve some of these.
Figuring out the path or establishing some guidelines for how to accomplish them?
Sure. And the other is, there's precedents here. Clearly the city staff are accomplishing, or they've accomplished these, and so we would maybe do a bit of reality check and say, could you do a bit more of these? I mean, they've done a really good job of accomplishing this or achieving a lot of these action steps. So is this something that, we can support them or encourage them to do? I haven't really looked at this in details, but it seems to me that there might be some low-hanging fruit that we can, achieve in the short term. Perhaps some are midterm. So that's the other that I would want for us to consider is what is our timeline on some of these actions? Because I think if we don't have a timeline, it might not inspire us.
Things drift. I
Well-
understand, well,
Sure.
move into that pattern.
Yes, clearly there are things that are beyond our control, like the road, but perhaps there are things where it might need a much longer timeline, so perhaps we work on it now.
Mhm.
I like the idea of trying to pick a couple of these that seem like they're doable in a reasonably short period of time and assigning some sort of a deadline to it. I mean, these aren't necessarily enforceable things,
No,
but at least it's like a target, a goal at which we could, complete a couple of these action items with the appropriate lead body, doing the bulk of the work.
So what do we see as the low-hanging fruit, if you will?
Well, I hadn't thought about this. I kind of look at this as a scorecard. I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective, like what would I prioritize? I think I would need more time. This is, to me, a topic we would discuss at the next one.
When you won't be here.
Well, you won't be here.
Or the one after that.
Well,
But I
Or
know
the one
how to-
after
but I
that.
know how to communicate with the commissioner, and I can give him ideas.
does any of this discussion merit handling this in in study sessions?
I-
I'll throw that out there. We've kind of moved away from, more recently, we haven't had a study session in general for, had a conversation with Jason about even for like a planning, site plan review, that in the past, we've had a study session to kind of feel our ground, share some concepts and ideas before we take them into the regularly scheduled meeting, just as you could consider it like a practice session. It's also a less or a more informal means of sharing ideas and concepts, and I think this may merit some of that too. It
Yeah, seems like
help us work through some of the uncertainties that may exist of how do we steer this forward.
I think that's a great idea. I think, if we all do some homework on this and then get together in a study session, potentially before the next planning commission meeting, then we can kind of refine and focus what we think will be a priorities, come to some sort of a consensus, and then that'll make our decision about what we decide to do in the formal planning commission about things like defining goal dates and things like, and what are we going to prioritize, really efficient.
Okay.
Will it, I love your enthusiasm and your motivation to do some things. So having said that, we're in the middle of a planning process. And so my inclination is to have you wait on this discussion until the end of the process. Because there might be other things that we add between now and then. And then how does that change the priorities? I think there are some things, certainly if we look at like goal 6, in terms of the protecting the quality and character of the residential neighborhoods, there are some things on there at the end that staff can do that I think are fairly straightforward and don't require a lot of resources. And we can talk about what that might look like. But in terms of, for example, developing a resource kit for homeowners. So these might be things on where to go for to improve your building. It might be your house. It might be like routine maintenance. It might be caring for your historic home. So maybe we work with the Historic District Commission on special resources aimed at brick maintenance and window maintenance and things like that. I think those kinds of resources that support that. If there are members in the community that are struggling a little bit to keep up with their homes and the maintenance of them, to be able to identify financial resources or other places that they can turn to for assistance in home maintenance. I think those are some things that's, I think, what we had in mind when we were talking about that goal 5 years ago in terms of that. That could be something that we could do collectively even to support staff on and be achieving a goal. Because I don't want you to feel like I don't want you to do anything over the next several months, but we are going to be talking about sort of the bigger picture before we get into the details of how we're going to move these things forward, just because I feel like we probably are going to add some things.
Do you anticipate adding more than these 6 goals?
No more goals.
Okay. So I would, so given that, I think it's relatively easy to adjust priorities if new
Okay.
actions are added.
That's fine.
Even if we've already prioritized the existing actions we're aware of.
All right, and I'm fine with that.
My
I just wanted to say that.
recollection were that these goals are, I think, were done by priority, and that goal 1, I believe, represented what most residents were concerned about, or what we thought were important. So I don't know, if Mark, you can
Right, and
help me.
I would concur with that, because that was
I mean,
probably
if you-
the
yeah.
largest driver, and then the other ones are kind of
Yes.
supportive of that goal, that key, that first priority goal.
So, but I would suggest that the highest priority goals for individuals providing their feedback to the Planning Commission and us representing it in the context of this plan may not be the most achievable things, right? The highest priority thing may be the hardest thing to do.
exactly.
Whereas
Well, it
there's a
is.
lower priority thing that's relatively easy to do that maybe in terms of order of execution, it makes sense to just kind of knock that thing off, right? The low-hanging fruit concept. So I think if we think about, between now and the next meeting, if we think about these action items in that context, then, it'll become maybe a little bit more apparent when we should move a lower priority thing higher up the chain in terms of how recent, how close to the current time they actually get executed. And should, resources be assigned to do those things, whether it's staff or a commission or some other resource.
Would it be helpful if we did that in like a survey format for you? So I'm thinking like if we did it in an online survey where we put the action items in and then we gave you either a ranking of like high priority, high cost, high priority, low cost, low priority, low cost, low priority, high cost, to let you decide where those kind of fall and then see how they all shake out.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know if
It
cost.
kind of gets to that 4-quadrant.
If cost is the only
Cost could be-
category, but it's
It's
part
it's
of
an example, I get it. I mean, it could be
Yeah.
effort, right?
Exactly. Yeah, cost could be time, resources.
it could be
human.
buy-in too, when it comes down to
Consensus, sure.
consensus. Yeah, consensus, and that's community consensus.
Yeah. That would be super helpful, I think.
But I would not want to lose the priorities in which we present the goals, because I mean, we went through a pretty extensive process of a series of stakeholders process, and I would not want to lose that. That is indeed the priority goal for, the neighbors. Goal 2 is the second
Sure.
priority, and that doing it by action item, we might then lose, our perspective on that. So more of it is, I think what you're trying to pose here is sort of like a feasibility. Just because it's not feasible right now doesn't mean that it's not important.
Right.
Or that
Just
you
because
don't-
it's not achievable now, it doesn't mean that it becomes a low priority.
Right. That's right.
I agree. So
So
it doesn't mean you don't spend the energy. Maybe there's more value in spending the energy and the focus to achieve something that's higher on the priority list, certainly. This is sounding very straightforward. As opposed to picking off smaller items. And I could just use as an example, tree and tree ordinance. I think I've raised that question in the past, and it's always been not high enough on the plate to be worried about. It does have an impact, and trees are, near and dear to my heart, but, there's a hierarchy of things that are important, maybe on a higher level than something of that detail.
Well, actually, that's a really good example because it's something that we've been thinking about as we're thinking about what kinds of things we're including in the master plan, what kinds of research that we want to do in terms of what you have. And trees has been something that we've been talking about. And I wonder if, as these things get prioritized by you, the action strategies, if that's something, for example, that rises to the level that you all agree is a high priority item, that we can substantiate that more in the master plan in terms of establishing why we would need a tree preservation ordinance, if that's what it turns out to be. And maybe it doesn't, but maybe that's something that we can be looking at, like what is your tree cover right now? You know, where are the areas that have significant trees that might be worth preserving, and sort of laying out things like that. So maybe understanding a little bit more about your value of these items can help us move those things ahead by adding further substantiation in the planning document itself.
Well, and to kind of go along with that, maybe it needs to be slightly broader than just tree protection, right? Like
Well,
I
was thinking, as you said it too, all of landscaping.
right, like
be
have
encouraged,
it,
yeah.
make it more of a beefier landscape ordinance, and one that, like, I personally think it would be awesome if we had a more sustainable focus. Like, we want to have an emphasis, for example, on native plantings, or actually doing rain gardens the right way, or, you know, maybe there's elements that we can add to it to achieve, I don't know, that get more buy-in, but also, you know,
Education.
Yeah,
I think there's an
you know, I
education
think there's a way to
process
do it.
there, and that steps beyond our individual expertise, but
Maybe a different approach, I mean, is to determine for each of these actions if the feasibility of achieving that in a short term versus a mid, you know, or longer term. So, because you don't work on, you know, the long term and just the short term, you can do them simultaneously. So maybe the exercise is understanding if these actions are indeed in the short term, or if they can be achieved in a 6-month term, in a 1-year term, because then we can stack them up, right?
Yeah.
So that the low,
Parallels.
yeah, so the low hanging fruit, sure, those are perhaps the ones that could be achieved within a year, and where they are not as resource intensive than the road.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's a longer term. So I think that might be a way of mapping out these particular items, because now it's not just an action item. We've put at least a timeline goal to it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So basically, we've got like three levels of evaluation, right? We've got our priorities, we've got our short, medium, long-term goals, and which ones are those, within those, which ones are the most feasible? From the bottom up or top down, however you want to
Which
look
ones
at
can you support or move along while
Right.
you're also working on the larger, or the more nitty-gritty, more intensive issues that take more effort or more
Resources.
resources behind resources, whether it's financial or even people in that case.
Yeah, so Jill suggested throwing a survey our way where we could start to individually come up with our weighting of what those things are, and then we could have a study session, discuss them, and come to some sort of a consensus, and at least we have a framework then, and even if we add additional
and I'm
action
looking
items.
for that framework, because I think we're kind of not blowing everything up, but sort of, and now we're trying to put the pieces together of finding that direction.
So think of it as a comprehensive feasibility study. And that's what we're doing here,
All
is
right.
a feasibility study.
And maybe we can give the results to you two ways. One would just be straight out, let the action strategies fall where they may, and maybe there's one where we weight, like related to goal 1 is going to be, we're going to weight that, so those are up at the top. Like, so we'd sort them by goal. I don't know, we'll have to look and see how we lay it out and how we sort them at the end so that it is meaningful.
I can see weighting each goal, but
It's not that many.
but I think the more instructive exercise is to identify which ones are really feasibly our short-term goals versus those that are longer term, because then we at least accomplish some of them.
Or even if there's still a priority.
And
Yeah.
and I guess the question would be, so if goal 1 is the highest priority goal, is it just presumed that everything in there is a high priority?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No.
Well, not high priority in terms of when you're going to do them, but high priority in terms of them
getting them done.
Yeah, you know, like,
Well, you got 6 goals here. I don't think that, you guys were here, a couple of you anyway, 5 years ago when this thing was built. Is goal 1 intended to be the most important goal, or are these just the 6 goals and they're kind of evenly?
No, these were ordered.
Okay.
In terms of, you know, the votes by residents.
What
to
about
say
the
this
action
is-
items underneath them? Were they, like, is 1.1.1 a higher priority than 1.1.2?
sometimes they go sequentially.
I
So, yes.
don't recall
one
as
would
much
have
in
to go
there.
before 2 in some cases.
Right, some of these are dependent, like you have to
Yes.
complete goal, action item
Right.
1 before you can complete action item 2, but I'm
Right.
talking about were they prioritized, like, you know, in goal 1, we have 1.1s, there's 3 of them, and we have 1.2s, and there are 2 of them. So is
I
1.1
think-
more
I think
important
to-
than 1.2?
I think, to be honest, what happens in the course of what happens with the commission is there was certainly a great deal of effort into establishing, creating this. You complete your master plan, you make it through the steps, and then you get busy with other things, like the day-to-day or the month-to-month. Site plan review comes in or something else, and we end up focusing on those issues, and we lose sight of staying on top of a list like this and chipping away at, you know, what, or establishing the directions that we need to take. Because by and large, you know, it's a volunteer, or, you know, it's an appointment, but we've all volunteered for positions here, and we step into these roles to, you know, once a month, certainly for one meeting, typically, but there's not necessarily the day-to-day thought. We come in and out of our daily lives and aren't necessarily keeping these front and center in front of us.
Right. So, Jason, on some of them, it's not generalized over, but there are some clearly to me that are sequential. Okay,
Yeah,
so the
I agree.
objectives might not be in order, but the actions underneath it are, it makes sense to me. I mean, they are indeed sequential, because you got to do this before that's done.
Sure, okay.
Right, so, but I'm looking at the rest of them, and I don't think that is the case. So I guess we really need to dig in a little bit more.
So that's I guess back to my question would be, okay, digging more into this, we can dig more into this evening. I think we're going to lose one of our camera guys to the tree lighting, certainly, but how do we want to approach this right now?
I mean, my recommendation is that we let Jill and the Giffords-Webster team come back to us with a survey, and then we individually, you know, respond to that survey and think about how we would consider each of these goals and supporting objectives and actions, and then have a study session before the next next planning commission meeting to discuss each of our individual responses to that survey, try to come to some sort of a consensus, and then ratify it in whatever way it makes sense to do that in the formal planning commission meeting.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes,
Yep.
I agree.
So I wondered what you have in mind in terms of the assessment criteria. Would we be judging based on, you know, the feasibility? Would you be asking us whether it's resource intensive? Would you be asking in terms of a time frame? Is it a short term, you know, midterm, long term, whatever, however you want to operationalize? Like short term might be, you know, less than a year. Long term is up to 5 years, something of that sort. Right? I think that could be a
You
criteria.
mean like as far as
Yeah.
goal setting?
Jill, do you think you could
I mean,
come up with kind of a
not
concept
goal,
based
but-
on like one of the goals and maybe distribute that to us so we can provide feedback to say if it makes sense to do it that way, then you continue with the other 5 goals in that manner, or we make adjustments if you get feedback from the commissioners that suggest adjustments.
We can try that.
Yep.
Sure.
So,
If we're going to do a study session, What days generally, beyond Tuesdays, what days generally work for you all?
Well, don't we generally just do them before the?
Do you want, well, but if
When
we're
we-
going to do that, then Jason's
When
out.
we've done them, we've
Right.
done them before the regularly
Okay.
scheduled
Right.
meeting, and we've just met like an hour before.
An hour
That
beforehand.
may or may not be enough time, depending on what we're trying to cover, but in terms of discussion, and obviously, if that's gonna involve Giffords Webster's time, that schedule's gonna be critical as well.
I'll twist around.
We'll figure out the format that makes the most sense. I mean,
Does anybody have an opinion right now as far as, is it same day better?
Generally speaking, I think that
Earlier?
an hour before our regularly scheduled meeting makes sense, because we're all going to be coming in
Right.
anyway, and we just have to adjust our schedules to get here an hour
Okay.
earlier. But, I mean, this topic may take more time than that.
Right.
So this might be an outlier, right? This might be,
Maybe you want to start with a separate date and a separate meeting time and duration.
just for this
So we're not
topic in
under
general.
constraints of going into a regularly scheduled meeting.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
fine with that
So then it
concept.
comes down to, study sessions, are they subject to Open Meetings Act? Do we need to notify the residents?
Yes.
Anyway, So
Yes.
we have to make sure that we get it on the schedule soon enough to be able to provide appropriate
Yes.
notice.
and then the
Now-
question is whether it's if it's going to be filmed and you're in here, or if it's in the conference room.
I think we can figure out the logistics of
Yeah.
that.
Well,
I was going to
reason
say,
I
the
ask
logistics
is
is
because-
what's required, because in the past,
Yeah, in the past, we've done it in the conference room. It hasn't been televised, but I don't know that we've
Right.
had any really since you started televising, so I'm not sure that there's an
yeah, we
issue
weren't
there.
televising prior to,
Me.
yeah.
Right, and then I guess I wondered what would make a study session different than a regular meeting?
It's focusing on a specific topic, and there are no,
We may not have any other items for,
well, there's
we'll have a
always
site-
other
we'll
agenda
have a site
items.
plan.
There is
We'll
always
have a
been an
site plan for
agenda.
Of course,
January.
the site plan we could do in study session, and then take the action quickly, hit the meeting, and then
Yes.
continue this discussion. That
Yes.
might be, in terms of what we have to discuss, that might be the easier thing to accomplish in a study session before.
I agree.
What's our deadline on the
Well-
master plan?
Generally, we were going to be looking at fall to have the plan all finished.
Yeah, I think we're
And we
going
don't
out for
wanna-
comment in July,
What?
August? We were going to go out for comment in July or August or something like that.
Yeah, so we're probably, this does slow us down a little bit, but we're going to keep going, and maybe we bring you more.
Well, I think we need to see that overall structure. I mean, that's probably part of our understanding of the time frame.
Yes, and because we shared that at the beginning of the process when we met back in August, when that, was that our
August
first?
5th, yes.
Yes.
I was not here.
Yeah, so we should have likely, I think, I would like to bring you more information at our next meeting than just this. So maybe it's, we do the survey, we consider those prioritizations, and then we don't necessarily, I mean, unless there's something that comes out of that, that you say, hey, you know what, I think we can just tackle this right now. Let's do this while we're doing the other stuff. And we can have that conversation, but the rest of it, I feel like, could just be kind of like, let's just put a pin in it and talk about it towards the end of the process, based on everything else that we'll hear during the process. I don't want us to get too bogged down with this particular part of the task.
I think after we respond to the survey, when we get a better idea about our consensus on specific points, that will naturally happen.
Yeah,
That we
So
will just put pins and
if we-
things and put them out to the end.
If we want to complete the master plan, say by
But we're not-
late summer.
yeah, right. I mean, it's not like a deadline.
Right.
We'd
you-
like to
yes.
just move along and be done with
Right,
it.
you don't want
Like, we
the,
don't-
you don't
You're
want the
working on it for
process
5
to
years.
spread out over,
No,
1,
because we
2.
lose momentum and people get tired of talking about it and they just want it to be done already, and can't we just start working on these action strategies?
And it gets really circular.
It does. So it's nicer to have, a more defined, shorter time frame that we had. And it's not, this is fine. Like, we're all good talking about all these things. It's all important. So we can adjust other things as we go.
Sounds good to
Okay.
me.
We have agreement on that point?
I agree.
Okay. If there's nothing else on that topic, we can move on to general communication and correspondence. Oh, other matters for discussion, sorry.
So I had two other matters for discussion I wanted to bring up. One of them I think we've already talked about, and that was starting to do study sessions again when it makes sense. So I think we've already talked about that one. The other one is at the beginning of the session, Mr. Chairman, you notified us that Vice Chair Kopis has resigned from the commission. Do we need to do anything about the vice chair position at this time?
I was going to recommend that we address the issue of positions at the next meeting next month.
Yeah, that's when we would be regularly electing officers
Electing
at any rate,
officers,
so.
right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Of course, it's the first one of the year. It makes sense. Yeah.
Good.
So we certainly weren't going to dive in and add that to the agenda tonight.
Nope.
Not with the, at the end of the year.
Okay.
Let's see.
That's it. That's all I have.
Okay, all right.
What's the plan in recruiting Bruce's replacement then?
Well,
Do you,
if you have individuals that you, seriously, if you have individuals that you think
After
may be a
time.
good fit for the planning commission, by all means, we have our applications online. Yvette has them.
all right, we got you back.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, does the city put out notices?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a
Officially, it'll
notice
be on-
out.
It should be on
Should be on the
website
calendar.
and the-
It'll get out there
et cetera.
sometime this week
Yeah,
that we've
website.
got a position open on the planning commission.
And then those will have to be reviewed, considered by city council, and then the appointments made.
Yep, we're compared
Okay.
and
Right.
hopefully
All
we'll
right.
get,
And in the meantime, the commission is still large enough, which is part of the reason for the expansion.
I will point out though that since we know that Jason's not going to be able to attend the next two meetings, that means the rest of you need to, because then we will be at quorum,
Quorum.
right? We need a
That's
quorum, so.
Sorry, everybody.
It's all right. You gave us a lot of notice.
I did give you
So,
Five. We have five.
so, be here, please. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, general communication, correspondence?
For me, I just want to wish everybody a safe and happy holiday. That's
Happy
my
holiday.
second item.
Thank you for that.
Thank you,
That's,
Council.
I like that update.
DDA update?
I got a few things. First, before I get on to the DDA update, I did pass out this lovely little letter
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
from Mr. Mandel. He dropped this off a couple weeks ago. I don't necessarily think it's anything you need to take action on, but I wanted to make sure that you had it and was aware that, that he's got some concerns about plantings in the spring. I mean, the proposed pictures, well, they're not great pictures, black and white, but I mean, I think those would be fine, right? And make fast improvement. So there's that. In terms of other, and he did appear before council last night to obtain his encroachment license to use the alleys. So, that's moving along. Otherwise, DDA-wise, we had a great turnout for our Shop Small Saturday Artisan Fair. I know I saw at least a couple of you. We had outstanding feedback. We had about 25 vendors, all downstairs in the community room. It was busy from 10 until 2, 3, which I think for the first, the first event in a while. Awesome. We've already got some ideas for next year, and we also did Lathrup Village Business Bingo to get people out and about, and they did not need to be small businesses.
Did they announce winners? Did they announce winners?
We did announce our winners. We only had we had 4 individuals complete the bingo card, and so Wendell, and I'm blanking on Wendell's last name, but he won our grand prize basket. So he was super excited, and we're really happy with that. I think we're going to change things out up a little bit for next year, but like I said, we have some good ideas. We also found out from Main Street Oakland County that The city was, out of the 50 communities in Oakland County that participated in the county's
Shop
Pride,
Small State?
Shop Small State, we ranked 19 out of 50 for sales.
awesome.
So
Wow.
That's great.
go us, go us.
Us.
That is awesome.
Otherwise, let's see, Ferris State students that have their presentations, it's a really large file. So I'm not going to email it to you all, but I will be putting it on the city's website this week. And I will send you a link to that so you can check out what they came up with. They have some really good ideas. There was elements, I think, from each different presentation. Like, yeah, I like that. And they were very thrilled that they could do that for us. So we met with Jill and I and a few others met with the technical side of things from the road commission earlier this month, and the road commission's got some. They need to go back and measure and kind of count some parking spaces for us, but we should be getting something from them soon, right?
Wait,
Soonish.
was that a point of concern, or is that just a?
It was just a refinement of
Yeah.
the information that we gave them a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they may be
Refining the
catching up
validation.
to where
Yeah.
we already
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
So.
It's just the process.
Just the process. Okay.
So, but I'm still taking it as a win that we keep talking. We've talked to him 2 months in a row, and we're going to make it 3 months in a row starting next month. So we have a joint community meeting scheduled with them for Thursday, January 23rd, and we've invited like the world, right? Southfield, Beverly Hills, Road Commission, all of our elected officials, like big state, local, regional. So
That's
We
item,
keep- we
that's
keep
on
making-
here, that's item 5.1.1 under objective 5.4,
5.1.1.
ongoing
1.1.
efforts.
We're making headway. Slow, but we're making headway. And I see Charles checking out the newest edition of the Prosper magazine.
Lathrup
So
Village.
we're in there.
Page 82.
Yeah. So yes, page 82. I think we have.
Oh, been looking for us, huh?
We're yeah. So
Very nice.
and otherwise that's all I have. I hope you all have a fantastic holiday and Happy New Year.
Oh, thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. That concludes DDA and staff.
Yep. Yes, I
We'll have
see that.
Cheryl here tonight, so I'm sure she's
Yes, she was out
occupied.
today.
Yes. So we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, meeting adjourned.